Well, if you're headed down the path to doing enterprise data analytics for your company, there's something that you need to be prepared for. And it may not have been something that you really thought about. Imagine that you're a year down the road after delivering an analytics solution. And this has been in production and being used by the business to make business decisions. And everybody's happy with it. Everybody loves the visuals, they love the data, they love the information they can get out of it, and they trust it. And all of a sudden, one day, somebody says in a conference room, in a meeting, this data isn't right. This can't be right. Where did you get this data? What's your source of record? Or they say, this number isn't right. I don't think this number is right. How did you get this number? What did you do to get at this number? These are things that really happen. These are things that have happened in conference rooms I've been in. And you need to be prepared when they happen. And by that, I don't mean mentally prepared. I mean, you need to be doing your processes and your documentation in such a way that these things are very easily answered and instill confidence in everyone who hears the answer and sees what you've done. Now, this means that there's a little bit more to delivering analytics solutions than just being able to do data engineering work and data analyst work and managing the project so that it actually gets done in a timely manner. This means that you have to be careful to make sure that you're following all the correct steps, involving all the right people, getting all the right sign-offs, and documenting everything in such a way that it makes everyone confident in your data and confident in your answers. Now, what this leads to is companies and people who work with data saying, maybe we need to go in and start a data governance project. Maybe we need to see about governing and cleansing and mastering all of our corporate data before we pull all of this into a solution so that we know our data is clean and pristine. I want to read some excerpts from a friend of mine, somebody that I worked with for about 3.5 years. His name's Caleb Thompson, and he's a data scientist and he's the manager over all of the analytics solutions at OneGas. And he wrote something and put it up on LinkedIn, I don't know, a few months ago. And I was really impressed with it. I thought that he hit the nail on the head, that he was exactly right 100%. And I agreed with him, and I thought it was really well said. Let me read some of this to you. This is just bits and pieces out of it. And this is a quote that he's been hearing. We can't do AI until we clean up our data. If you say this to your leadership, it implies that you're not able to execute on any AI initiatives until you create and implement a data governance or data integrity program and clean all the data. That journey will likely take years. Then in parentheses, he says decades. And in truth, you'll never have perfect data. If AI can be utilized to solve that problem, then you can clean and improve the quality of the data related specifically to that use case and drive the desired outcome. Now, this is key because you can get into just a huge time suck with trying to cleanse data that isn't relevant to the analytics solution that you're delivering at the time. If, on the other hand, you worry about the data that's in the solution that you're developing at that time and cleanse and master and govern that data and get it all approved by the correct data stewards, all of these problems go away. If in that conference room, you can give the answer that says, this data came from here, here's the source, here's the lineage, this is the person in that business group that's responsible for that data, that vetted all of the data, approved all of the numbers and all of the calculations, and signed off on that data all being correct. If there's an issue or there appears to be an issue, you should get with that person because they know the data better than anyone. That solves all of these things. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at processes and documentation as it relates to doing analytics solutions, because I think it's very, very vital if you want people to have confidence in your data that you do these things correctly. Now, this isn't the only way to do it. This is how I've done it. This comes from a 3.5 year time that I spent at One Gas as their business intelligence architect. I worked closely with a number of the people over there, and we came up with this process, this reference architecture on how we did solutions. Now, they crank out a lot of analytics solutions over there. They successfully roll out in parallel multiple solutions at a time. They have a team of about 15 people in that group cranking out analytics solutions all the time, and they're very well respected. As near as I can tell, and as far as I know, everyone in that company feels 100% confident in the data that they see in all of those solutions. So I think this is a very good approach. I've tweaked it some. I've added bits and pieces to it since leaving One Gas, doing consulting work, particularly things that I think help with sign-offs and approvals and things like that. So I want to go through this rough idea of how you can do these projects, document them, and the steps that you take in building things. The documents that I'm going to show you are not specific to any project. They're not for any specific solution. In fact, they're all just generic, vanilla, demo-only documents. There's no real data in any of them. Because of that, they're pretty empty, and you kind of have to use your imagination, but they will give you the idea of what those documents would look like. And as we go through the steps and the output of those steps as being documents, I think they'll help you a lot. So let's get into it. All right, as we get started in this, I'd like to begin by giving a huge shout out to the people over at One Gas. We put all this document together when I was over there as a business intelligence architect, and I worked with a number of people over there that all contributed to all of this. I'd love to be able to take all the credit for it, but I really can't. This document's called the Technical Integration Architecture Process and Interactions. Now, that's a mouthful. Basically, it's the reference architecture document. This is what defines all of the different steps that are involved in delivering a single BI solution, whether that's descriptive or advanced analytics. Now, all of these things would be the steps that you go through, who's involved in those steps, and then the artifacts is basically the outcome of those steps, the documents that come out of those. And then over here, you can see you have who's the owner or the responsible parties for each of these. And they're abbreviated. So over here are the titles that go along with those abbreviations. This is designed so that solution after solution, they all work the same. They all go in the same cadence. They all have the same deliverables. You can expect the same documents to come out of each of them and the same roles to be used in each of them so that they're repeatable. And this is something that we did at One Gas. It's also something that since leaving One Gas, I've done in all my consulting roles. This one's the architectural placement diagram. This is done by the architect. This shows all of the locations where data is sourced from, the path that it takes through any different transformations, landing in any kind of a hub or stage, if it's going into a sensitive area, if it's being filtered, if row level permissions are being applied to it, anything like that. All of that stuff goes in here, and it shows the entire path of all of the data architecturally. Oftentimes, what the business really likes seeing in this is any security implications that are going to be involved in how they're being handled. This is a sample dimensional model. This is done by the BI developer and the architect. Primarily, the developer develops it, and then the architect really approves it. Initially, when the developer's a little more junior, the architect may spend a lot more time with them going over it. And then once they become pretty experienced, they do most of the work themselves. And then mostly it's an approval process, maybe bouncing some ideas. Have you thought about this? Why did you do that way? That kind of thing. A couple of things I want to point out about dimensional models. The way that we did them, we used table names, and actually it was schema names to identify the type of data that was in the table. Obviously, you've got dimensions and facts, so you have dim schema and fact schema. But we went a little bit further. We had a conf for conformed dimensions. Now, those are dimensions that can be reused across numerous solutions and joined to numerous fact tables. They're basically reusable dimensions. And sometimes dimensions really should be used as a one off. The way this department treats their data is not the way that the whole company treats it. It's really more of a one off dimension. But then there are things that should be used, like maybe you've got an employee dimension and it's used across every solution. So that might be a conformed dimension. We also used CERT dimensions. That would be certified. And that means that the data in that dimension has been really, really vetted and picked apart by data stewards from the business unit that that data comes from. So, for example, if it's a HR dimension, someone in HR has really gone through that data and vetted it very fully and thoroughly and made sure that every single thing in that dimension is exactly right and correct. It's been fully governed and it's been fully cleansed and is reusable anywhere. So when you go to do a solution, you go out and you look and say, hey, it looks like I've got a couple conformed dimensions and I've got a couple certified dimensions. I don't have to do any development work on those at all. I can just use them in my next project. We also had schemas. We had what we called S schemas. That would be SDIM, SCONF, SCERT. These are sensitive schemas. That means there's sensitive data in there. Those schemas have very restricted access from the beginning, which means if you put something in, say, a SCERT dimension, most people can't access it. They have to have very explicit permissions to even be able to read that data. And that was something that we did. The other thing that you'll see in dimensional models is fact tables. That's where all of your aggregated data, your numbers and things that you're going to do calculations on go in fact tables, and then they join to all of the different types of dimensional data. I'm a big fan of the Kimball methodology, and the data modeling that we did and that I continue to do to this day is all based on Kimball. This next one's a little bit interesting. This is called a dimensional matrix. And the idea of this isn't specific to this solution. This crosses all solutions. And this document is updated by the BI developer after they finish the dimensional model. The idea is all of the solutions and all of the dimensions are in this one document, and it's updated for each solution to show which dimensions are in every solution. If you'll notice, on the left side of the document is where all of the different solutions would be listed. And then if you look across the top, that's where all of the different dimensions would be listed that would be used in all the solutions. The idea being, if, say, for example, they're going to do an upgrade to the HR system and it's going to affect a bunch of data and there's going to be changes to data elements, you want to take all of those dimensions that come from that source and go through each of the solutions that use that data and make sure that you're not going to have to fix anything. So this is a cross-reference to let you know where all of that data is being used so that you can easily get to it. This is a source to target mapping document. This is one that nobody really likes doing, but if you have to troubleshoot a data element in a solution months and months or maybe even years after it's been developed, this is such a handy document because this tells you where every single element in that solution came from and how it got to be where it's at. So it lists the source and the target path to the object, and it tells you what process was required to get it there, what stored procs, what packages, what notebooks, what pipelines. It tells you where it gets handled in the orchestration process. It's handled by this job or this process, and it basically tells you exactly where you need to go to be able to fix the problem. Now, it says in the reference architecture that this is done by the BI developer and the architect. Truthfully, the very first time a developer does this, the architect may need to help them out with how it needs to look and what needs to be included. After somebody's done one of these, it's pretty tedious and routine, mundane work. So it's really just the developer that does this. And again, nobody really likes doing it. It probably takes a couple hours to do for a solution before you wrap it up, but it is very handy. Okay, this is an important one. This one's done by the data stewards. In other words, they aren't part of the regular BI team. They come from whatever part of the organization that the solution is drawing data from. So if this is financial data, there's somebody from the finance team. If it's HR data, it's somebody from HR. And they're going to vet this data and they're going to basically sign off on it. So you can see down through here that you're going to have every table and every column that goes into the solution from a particular source environment or in a specific dimension. And then they're going to specify whether that data needed to be and is cleansed, mastered, transformed, if there's specific business transformations that they know has to happen to this data. This data, in order to be useful in this solution, we need to change this to this, for example. They're basically going to specify the source of record. Tags, to be honest, I really haven't used tags in this any time that I can recall, but it's in there in case somebody wants it. And lineage, if it goes from here to here to here, like maybe we pulled the data from here, but it's not where it originated from. It originated in this system and then it was used by this system, and that was the place that we pulled it from because that's where the business said that they wanted it from. And then the approved is where that person who is the data steward designates their name there. So when you have, say, a certified dimension and somebody says, hey, I'm not sure about this, or where did this come from, and is this done like this? They can go look at this and see, well, this was the system of record, this was the lineage of it, and it was signed off, and this was any transformations. So if the data doesn't seem right, it could be that there was a transformation that that business person said, hey, this data needs to have this done to it before you use it. Very important document. This one right here is the answer to the conference room questions that came up at the very beginning of this discussion. This is the one that basically means I did my part and I did exactly what the business requested and exactly what they signed off on, and you should talk to them if you've got questions. This is the last document. This is your tabular documentation. This is where your DAX code goes. I will encourage you as much as possible, reduce DAX code in your reporting and dashboarding layer. Try to move that into an ETL or data warehouse layer as much as possible so that your reports and dashboards are as snappy as you can make them and as light as you can make them. This requires a little bit of imagination because obviously this is all vanilla and there is no real DAX code here. So you kind of have to use your imagination, but it is helpful to have all of that code documented so anybody who wants to can see what's actually going on. That's a lot of documentation and a lot of processes, and it's not what technical folks really love doing. But I really, really want to encourage you to consider doing all of this. And again, it goes back to what we said in the very beginning. If you get caught with some very skeptical questions in a meeting and it puts you in an undesirable position, having answers and documentation that absolutely cannot be denied is what's going to make your work stand out as truly exceptional. If before that happens, everybody appreciates, well, these things are really good and they're really helpful and they're really useful, that's all well and good. But when somebody tries to pin you down and say, I'm not so sure about this, and your documentation and your explanations completely cannot be denied and shuts down those questions, it really makes your work stand out that much more. And who doesn't want to be a rock star? So do the work. And one more thing, in addition to that, one thing to consider is as your team expands, and it should because your analytics should be desirable and your company should want more and more and more as they see what you're delivering. As this happens and your team has to expand, these documents and processes ensure that from one developer to the next developer to the next developer, from one analyst to the next analyst, from one business analyst to the next business analyst, these things are all going to be consistent and the work's always going to come in looking and behaving and operating the same way. So it's really, really, really helpful. I hope you got a lot out of this. I hope you find this very useful. If so, click like and subscribe because, oh, why the hell not?